He's just resting, waiting for a new life to come.
Welcome to MsMojo, and today we're taking a deep dive into Mary Shelley's masterpiece, Frankenstein, for our MsMojoNotes series. In this video, we'll be using APA citations to refer to the text, and using the 2018 Penguin Classics edition of the 1818 text. Who is Mary Shelley? Today, Mary Shelley is renowned and widely remembered for her contributions to Gothic literature and science fiction. Frankenstein is regarded by many as the first true piece of sci-fi. Less than 2 weeks after she was born in 1797, her mother, the influential proto-feminist Mary Wollstonecr, tragically died, an event that would affect Shelley for the rest of her life. Born Mary Godwin, when she was 16, she met the romantic poet Percy Bysshe Shelley, 5 years her senior.
At first I wasn't sure, but I knew I had to hide it from Father.
Though he was married to someone else, the pair ran away together, touring Europe. This led to a fateful stay in Villa Diodati in Switzerland, rented by Lord Byron in 1816. This was also the famous Year Without a Summer, when the 1815 eruption of Mount Tambora in Indonesia led to a global cooling event. The weather was foul, and in a story that's now well known, Byron challenged his friends to write the scariest stories while they were trapped inside together. One of these was John William Polidori's The Vampire, one of the first vampire novels ever written. But nothing could compare with what Mary Shelley produced, the beginnings of Frankenstein.
The moon's rising. We've no time to lose.
According to Shelley's notes, the first words she formed were, quote, "It was on a dreary night of November that I beheld my man completed." What's the plot? The plot of Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus, is very familiar to most people. But though we all know the broad strokes, Victor Frankenstein tries to create life and creates a monster. How does the story actually unfold?
The brain of a dead man, waiting to live again in a body I made with my own hands.
It begins in the 18th century, not with Victor Frankenstein or his creature, but with the Arctic explorer Robert Walton, who was set out on a journey to discover the North Pole.
They knew the risk when they signed on, and we are going to chop our way to the North Pole if we have to.
Then you run the risk of mutiny, Captain.
It's key to note here that nobody successfully went to the North Pole until roughly 90 years after Frankenstein was first published, so it was still mysterious. Walton is writing letters to his sister, Margaret Walton Saville. In his fourth letter, Walton tells Margaret how his crew have seen, quote, "a being which had the shape of a man, but apparently of gigantic stature, crossing the ice with a pack of dogs." They then find Victor Frankenstein himself, sick with exhaustion. Frankenstein reveals he is pursuing the giant, and Walton brings him aboard.
There's a passage to the North Pole, and I will find it.
The cost of your own life, the lives of your crew.
When Frankenstein hears of Walton's ambition to find the North Pole, Frankenstein resolves to tell Walton why he is wrong, launching into the story. At length, Frankenstein talks about his happy childhood with his parents and two brothers, Ernest and William. He also grew up alongside Elizabeth Lavenza.
You must have faith in me, Elizabeth. Wait. My work must come first, even before you.
It's widely understood from the beginning that Elizabeth and Victor will one day marry. Frankenstein becomes obsessed with alchemy and other esoteric forms of science, and is sent to the University of Ingolstadt to study.
Herr Frankenstein is a most brilliant young man, yet so erratic. He troubles me.
While some mock him for his interests, others encourage him. In the novel, Frankenstein leaves it purposefully vague how he builds the creature and animates it. He does this on purpose, telling Walton that he doesn't want anybody else to repeat his mistakes. He says, quote, "Learn from me, if not by my precepts, at least by my example. How dangerous is the acquirement of knowledge, and how much happier that man is who believes his native town to be the world, than he who aspires to become greater than his nature will allow." In most adaptations, however, we see Frankenstein constructing his man from body parts, and then reanimating him with lightning.
The bodies we use in our dissecting room for lecture purposes were not perfect enough for his experiments, he said.
This is largely thanks to the hugely influential 1931 movie, which, while iconic, takes many liberties with the story.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
However animation is accomplished, the creature is brought to life, and Frankenstein is horrified by the 8-foot-tall monster he has built.
You have created a monster and it will destroy you.
Frankenstein says that this is a, quote, catastrophe, and that he had intended his creation to be beautiful, but it hasn't worked. He says, quote, "His yellow skin scarcely covered the work of muscles and arteries beneath. His hair was of a lustrous black and flowing, his teeth of a pearly whiteness, but these luxuriances only formed a more horrid contrast with his watery eyes." He flees and abandons the creature, hiding in his apartment, and when he returns, the creature has disappeared.
This creature of yours should be kept under guard.
Much later, Frankenstein's brother William is tragically killed. The nanny, Justine, is assumed to be guilty and executed for it.
This is unlawful!
But Frankenstein ultimately reunites with the creature, who has now learned to speak, and tells him what had happened in his absence, including that the creature was responsible for William's death, as Frankenstein had assumed.
The sea of ice. I will meet you there.
The creature lived for a time in the woods, eating only berries and nuts he could forage, until he found the de Lacy family living in a cabin. By listening to them, he learns to read and to speak French, discovering that they were a noble family in Paris until they were exiled.
Yes, I speak and read and think.
The father of the family is blind, so the creature decides he'll introduce himself to him first. However, this doesn't work and he is chased away.
Father! Get out of here! Get out of here!
He then sets his sights on Frankenstein, whom he blames for abandoning him, and tracks him down in Geneva. He comes across William and murders him, then frames Justine, feeling little remorse. He demands that Frankenstein makes him a woman.
A female. Someone like me. So she won't hate me.
He says, quote, "You must create a female for me, with whom I can live in the interchange of those sympathies necessary for my being. This you alone can do, and I demand it of you as a right which you must not refuse." Frankenstein agrees at first, but then decides that he cannot bring another monster into the world and goes back on his word.
You will honor your promise to me!
I will not.
This enrages the creature, who claims a third victim, Frankenstein's friend Henry Clerval, and tries to frame Frankenstein for it. He ominously tells Frankenstein, quote, "I will be with you on your wedding night." Frankenstein believes the creature is going to kill him when he marries Elizabeth, but he's wrong.
Something is going to happen. I feel it. I can't get it out of my mind.
He does marry Elizabeth, and then discovers that she is the creature's fourth and final victim. Following this grief, Frankenstein decides to track the creature around the world, chasing him all the way to the Arctic, where he meets Walton.
I followed the trail he left for me.
Walton is persuaded by his men to turn back, leaving glory in the North Pole behind. Frankenstein decides to leave the crew and continue chasing the creature, but he's too weak and dies hours later.
He's dead. He died raving.
In the final moments, the creature reappears and laments the loss of his creator, confessing that the murders and revenge didn't make him happy.
Who are you?
He never gave me a name.
He tells Walton that he's going to destroy himself. The novel ends as the creature is, quote, "borne away by the waves and lost in darkness and distance." Who are the characters? Frankenstein and the creature are the two characters with the most focus, the hero and the villain, though Shelley leaves it up to the reader to decide which is which. Victor is beloved by all in his life, but is unable to see that he already has true happiness in his family. Instead, he pursues the occult and gives in to limitless ambition, which is his downfall.
The neck's broken. The brain is useless. We must find another brain.
The creature, on the other hand, is misunderstood by the world and by his creator, but is also vindictive and dangerous.
What of my soul? Do I have one? Or was that a part you left out?
Though he attests many times that the cruelty of man has made him violent, and that if he were happy, specifically by having a wife, he would stop, he still commits multiple crimes. It's up to you to determine which of them is the most sympathetic.
The very day we announced our engagement, he told me of his experiments. He said he was on the verge of a discovery so terrific that he doubted his own sanity.
Other major characters include Elizabeth, whose death causes Frankenstein to finally decide to destroy the creature, Clerval, whom Frankenstein likens to himself when he was younger, and Walton, who is similarly a mirror of Victor used to teach us about the dangers of abandoning morality in search of knowledge.
Listen to me. I have spent 6 years planning this, my entire fortune. I will not be stopped by you or some phantom.
Who do you think is the real hero of the story, Frankenstein or his monster? Be sure to let us know. What are the themes? Though Frankenstein is a short novel, it's dense, and there are a lot of ways to read it, which is part of what makes talking about it so fascinating even over 200 years later. The first key theme we're going to talk about is man versus God.
Now I know what it feels like to be God. Oh.
Through the secondary title, The Modern Prometheus, we're immediately introduced to the story of Prometheus in Greek myth. Prometheus is a titan who creates humankind from clay and then defies the gods by bringing them fire from Olympus. He is punished harshly for this by Zeus. But while Prometheus cares for his creations and nurtures them, Frankenstein does the opposite, running in horror from the man he has created.
You gave me these emotions, but you didn't tell me how to use them.
This sets up Victor Frankenstein's fatal or tragic flaw, his arrogance and ambition. As he tells Walton many times, his mistake is thinking he can and should be able to do what God does, that is, creating life from nothing. Where a benevolent God would have loved the creature no matter what, Frankenstein is human and fails.
You gave me life, and then you left me to die.
There's also something to be said for the perversion of religion here. In the Bible, Genesis 1:27 says, quote, "So God created man in his own image." By making the creature appear human, Frankenstein is also trying to create a man in the image of God and doing so with disastrous consequences.
Come with us! I am done with man.
The creature, too, learns about Christianity. He tells Frankenstein explicitly, quote, "Remember that I am thy creature. I ought to be thy Adam, but I am rather the fallen angel," comparing himself not to Adam, but to Lucifer or Satan. In a similar vein, another major theme is the natural versus the unnatural. The creature is, of course, deeply unnatural. He even uses the word unnatural to describe himself.
Did you ever consider the consequences of your actions?
Created artificially in a laboratory in the early days of modern science and research, he embodies the unnatural in such a way that Frankenstein abandons his science as soon as the creature is brought to life.
You were wrong. Here in this machinery, I have gone beyond that.
By contrast, the natural world is always portrayed positively. Exploring and observing nature is something all the characters enjoy, and it brings them all a sense of comfort, including the creature, who at the end laments that he won't be able to enjoy the world anymore upon his death.
Shut out the light.
But again, this is about arrogance and Frankenstein's belief that he can go against nature so thoroughly with no retribution. Though it's not clear what kills Frankenstein specifically, he does suffer greatly and ultimately die after journeying into the harshest natural environment of all, the Arctic.
Captain, this is useless. The ice stretches for miles.
Finally, there's the theme of parental responsibility. When you have a child, what do you owe to that child?
Oh, isn't it convenient? Or doesn't it fit in with your plans? Don't you ever think of anyone or anything but yourself?
This is something else that Shelley is preoccupied with. It's widely thought that Shelley was drawing upon her own experiences with her parents when she wrote Frankenstein. Her mother was, of course, not absent by choice, but was absent nonetheless. Her father, meanwhile, ended up abandoning and ostracizing Shelley when she left England to begin her affair with Percy.
Why do you weep?
He was my father.
It was to her father, William Godwin, that she dedicated Frankenstein. This theme of responsibility is very clear, particularly where family is concerned.
Now 2 people are dead because of us.
Even when it leads to tragedy, as it does when Victor's mother nurses Elizabeth through scarlet fever and then succumbs to the disease herself, parents taking responsibility for children is a crucial theme.
Mother, oh, how is the imminent arrival?
a little frisky today.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. What's the legacy of Frankenstein? 200 years later, and we're still talking about this novel, and still seeing it appear in pop culture. Victor Frankenstein and his creature are recognizable around the world as horror icons, with even Disney making retellings of the story.
There's nothing wrong with Victor. He's just in his own world.
For the first 3 years the book was published, it was anonymous, with nobody other than Shelley's inner circle knowing that she was the author.
Your hand?
13 years after the first edition, in 1831, she revised it and also added a new introduction, in which she explained how a young girl came up with such a hideous idea.
Your daughter is a little psycho.
The sheer originality of Frankenstein has given it such a long lifespan, as a cornerstone in both the Gothic and science fiction genres, as well as making Shelley a key figure in the influential Romantic movement of the 19th century.
You're alive! You're alive!
As early as 1823, it was being adapted successfully for the stage, with Shelley even complimenting one version, Presumption, for thinking of things she hadn't thought of when she wrote it. Centuries on, and Frankenstein has no copyright, meaning it's free to adapt, and to adapt as loosely as the filmmakers like, which is to say, usually very loosely.
Elizabeth. Yes.
Even the lauded 1931 version changes key details, like Frankenstein's name being Henry, and him inviting his friends to watch as he reanimates the dead in his laboratory.
Henry, you're inhuman! You're crazy!
Crazy, am I? We'll see whether I'm crazy or not.
Simply put, it's one of the greatest, most influential works of fiction ever produced, made even more impressive by the fact Shelley was only 18 when she started writing it, and 20 when the first edition was published. How many people can say they invented a whole new genre, which would go on to be one of the biggest things to happen in the entire canon of Western literature before they turned 21? For our money, only Mary Shelley has that claim to fame.
You can talk to my lawyer.
Really hope this goth phase ends soon.
Let us know in the comments what your favorite adaptation of Frankenstein is.
It's alive! Oh, it's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Do you agree with our picks? Check out this other recent clip from MsMojo. And be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.